In 1965 was the year that the Ouachita team did so well in the national tournament. In fact, those freshmen that I came in with in '61, '62, then they won the conference 3 of those 4 years, and they went to the national tournament 3 of those 4 years, which was very unusual because that first year, in fact, I started to tell you a few minutes ago, Arkansas Tech had been just
Right.
the leader, and when it came time for this tournament, then we had played them the last game of the season and had gotten beat, or beat, whichever. Anyhow, they whipped us up there 25 points on their home floor, and and our numbers were 12-13, 12 wins, 13 losses. And so we went in the tournament, and we played 3 teams in the tournament. UCA, and beat them, which they had beaten us before, and we played. I can't remember the other team right now, but then we faced Arkansas Tech in the finals, and they had, the horses back then, and the defense that I was telling you about that I put in that full court, zone press. We had worked on it all year, and it legitimately would go into work one day. Well, that day is the day it started. And I'm telling you, even though we'd used it against Tech before, we beat Arkansas Tech, and they had already made arrangements for rooms in Kansas City, there. So we didn't have to make arrangements. We just took their rooms up there, which saved me a little time, which was good. But we would go up one step and back 2, and it was tough. It was tough all the way. But we ended up, oh, dear me, I thought I'd never forget that score. And seemed like it, 101-88 was the score of that game. Now I've forgotten what question I was getting to.
But you did very well.
Okay, now I'm back. Now we represented then our district in Kansas City for the 3rd time. Mm-hmm. And so we played the home team, the Missouri team, up there. And of course, there's no doubt but what we were, the weaker of the two. They were the ones they expected to win, and we beat them. And then we played the next team. You had to play 5 times during that week. 32 teams, either 5 or 4. And so we won that. I think it's 4. Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, Friday, Saturday. No, it was 5. So then we played the next team and won, and we played the 3rd team, and we won. But in the process, we lost the Clements boy, which was our big horse. Yeah. And so we had played Oklahoma Baptist previously and had beaten Oklahoma Baptist. But that night, without Clements, we didn't stand much of a chance. And so we lost to Oklahoma Baptist that night. And but we were all, that was the time, though, that our team was picked, you know, as the sportsmanship team and as whatever other, you know, there's two things they give out, you know, there. And we won both of those, having, you know, done well, but not winning. And then we played for third place the next day, a team out of the Carolinas and West Virginia, and we beat them. So we had 4 out of 5. So then there was a scheduled event for a team to go to South America, and the coach, Coach Gudger, was from somewhere in North Carolina. Then was already selected as the head coach, and he had the right to select an assistant. And he asked me immediately after our game if I would serve as his assistant to go on that trip. And I did, and we made a pretty good trip, you know, through South America, and had it pretty enjoyable. I took one player, took the Clements boy, on with us on that trip, and then the following year or the next year, then the NAIA and the AAU were in bed together. Now the AAU is NCAA.
Right.
And so when they had a tour that the State Department requested someone to take, then they came to the AAU. And then the AAU normally then came to the NAIA. And they asked, you know, we've got a tour now that goes into Africa. Would you like to take that? And of course the NAIA would take it. And so they called me about going to Africa. And so I took that and went to Africa. And then we did well, you know, I was a pretty good disciplinarian, you know, even though they weren't my players. And so this information, you know, would work its way back to the hierarchy. So that's the way we got started going. And so I was then invited to go as assistant to Denny Crum to the World University Games, which is second to the Olympics.
Yeah.
And by that time, I was on the Olympic committee, had been appointed to that committee. Then the following year, I was asked to take a team to Russia and get them prepared for the 1980 Olympics to be played in, where was that? Was it in Russia? I think it was. And so we went I took a team then into Russia, and then we played the Russian team there. We played their best, you know, their Olympic team. But we played them in different places. We met them in Yugoslavia and played there. Yugoslavia was a good team. We beat the Yugoslavia team. Yugoslavia beat Russia, and Russia beat us. And you know, in pre tournament play. And then we went on to the World University Games, wherever it was. Yeah, I'm gonna have to
that's fine.
think a little bit
That's fine.
there. Bolivia? No, wasn't Bolivia. But anyhow, I had several of those opportunities.
Right.
I had one where I was to select a high school team.
Yeah.
They selected the team. I had 3 New York players. I had 3 Detroit players, and 1 Utah, and 1 Louisiana. And I'm going to tell you, that was the world's worst trip. I had, I don't need to get too far into this, so I'll just touch the top of this. But the first night that we were there, we got kicked out of the hotel where we were staying in France. The tournament was to be in Europe, one in France and one in Greece and one in Sicily, so and in Belgium, and it would have been a nice tour if I hadn't had the players I had, but
Some of these became famous names, right?
not of these.
Not that group. Okay.
No, no. I had Magic Johnson on a trip.
Yeah.
And this was one of them that we went into Russia
Okay.
and
Okay.
played in the world in that
Okay.
game.
Okay.
They called it something else, some other type. And then I had Larry Bird on another team. Had Lindsay, Moncrief.
Yeah.
Moncrief was on one of our teams. But on that particular one with the high schoolers, we got the kids had stolen something out of the French players' rooms. They just left their rooms open, and our kids walked by and they picked up a few things out of there. And I had to find out who had it and what it was and whatever. Watches, had a watch or something, and so I had to start the game with the 5 players, and the other 5 or 4 were taking everybody's clothes out of that hotel and moving them somewhere else. I'm telling you, it was, this was one of those unbelievable things. And they showed up. We win. We tie the game. And then at the end of the game, I look over and the French players are putting their uniforms on. And I said, wait a minute, this is a tie game. And they said, well, yes. I said, there are no tie games in basketball. He says, there are in France. So we have one tie game on record, that's for sure. And then we were playing the French team the next night at a different place. So I was awakened the next morning because that after the day that I say it is the morning after that, when we arrived there into this other town in lower France, southern France, then I turned the kids loose and they walked the streets and came back. And then we played that night. The next morning, I got a knock on my door. They woke me up, and it was the police. And they said, I knew I already had a couple of watches stolen, and I lowered the boom on them, and I said, guys, I've got to have those watches back, and it's either that or we all go back to the United States tomorrow. Well, they brought me some watches. So I had them in my room when they came to the door. And I said, oh, wait a minute, I have the watches here. Let me get them for you. And the guy says, it's not the watches that were stolen from the players. These are watches that were stolen downtown yesterday afternoon. I said, oh, don't tell me. more watches. So I called a meeting again. I'm reminded of that thing that said, let's have a meeting. We got to get together. And I talked to him again. And I said, we're at the point now, someone's going home. I said, we got to find those watches, and we are on our way. And I said, now, they are not going to release us until we get the watches. So we may be in France this time next year, but you won't be out here playing basketball. You'll be in jail. I said, they put you in jail first in France, and then you have your trial after that. I said, but you'll be in jail till that comes about. I told a fib, but I had to have something. I needed everything I could get. Well, they said, Coach, if you'll give me, I had one of those smart alecks. He said, Coach, he's a New Yorker. He said, Coach, you just give us a few minutes. Let us get together. I think we can get those back. So they went off, and they got those watches and brought them back. This time, they got all of the watches except one, because they had the shopkeeper was there, and he looked at his watches, and he said, these three are mine. This one belongs to another store in town. So he was still minus one, and that other one goes to someone else. So I said, okay, the game's up. We're going to get them. I'm going with you. We're going. What they had done, there was a place, their place, their hotel's a little different from ours. They're one level kind of, and then they've got a courtyard out the back. And they had dug out there in the flower bed and put those watches down in there. So we got that watch back. And I knew two of the boys in Detroit were guilty. I think three, but I know two of them were. So I told my assistant, who was he was a Detroit coach at that tournament, They had a tournament of the AAU. I said, you get their tickets out of my box here. I kept all their tickets. And I said, you take their tickets and you call a cab, and you and these two boys take that cab and you drive to the railhead and you carry them to Paris, and you put them on the first plane you can get them on and send these guys back home. I am not putting up with this. They're on their way back. So he didn't want to, but he agreed. Mm-hmm. And now here's the clincher. One of them was the biggest boy we had, and the other was the best shooter. But that didn't matter. I could care less at that stage. So we got the cab, got them all ready to go, and our boys were out there, telling them bye. And the tall guy, before he got back in that little old Renault that they had, he said, "Oh dear me," he said, "I've got this camera that I bought just before I came over here. Since I'm not going to be here, anybody want it?" Said, "I'll take $10 for it." So nobody, said that they'd take it. I didn't have a camera. I said, "I'll give you $10 for it. Number one, I'll take it. Number two, you get out of here." So I gave him $10. As they drove off, you talking about the guys laughing over on the side. They said, "Coach, he stole that also." So I've still got that camera at my house. I said, "Oh my goodness, don't tell me." But anyhow, I don't know where we were on this, but I got them back. Other than that,
Yeah.
we had a fairly good trip. And then I arrived back home, and I called my wife. Somehow there was a United States person there that night in the restaurant where we ate. And he got talking to us, and he said, you want to call anybody in the States? I said, I sure do. He had some kind of rig. I don't know what he did, but I think this was rigged up.
Yeah.
So he got Ann on the phone. And I told her, I said, hey, I've had all this I can stand. I said, I wish this was my last day, but just think, I've just been here 2 days, and I got 30 days to go. So when I made it back, I said, man, don't you ever let me go back again. I am not going. So I went on to the tournament that year, and they called me in. The guy, Mr. Dewar, who's the head of the NAIA, said, we want you to take this group to Israel. And man, that's where I wanted to go. I wanted to go. And I said, Mr. Dewar, I am not sure, but I said, can you wait till I get home and call you back? Said, yeah, I'll wait. But now I said, this is a good trip. They want us over there, and they will make it great. I got home, and in a little bit after I'd said my hellos, and and the next morning I said, oh, by the way, they asked me whether I would take a group to Israel. I mean, I should not have said that. You said you were not going anywhere this year, and you are not going anywhere. You are going to stay at home this summer. I said, well, I didn't tell them I was going. I just said they offered it to me. And I said, I am not going. So I sneaked in and made the telephone call and told them, I said, guys, I cannot go. I'm sorry, but I've got more than a tour on my hands right now. So I stayed home, but I did take another one later on. Yeah, and
Now, I remember the night that you got your 500th win. And that was quite a family gathering, too. You had just about everybody back that night.
yeah. Well, you always shoot for something. And I think, if I recall, we had maybe lost a couple of games before that, but this happened we're kind of glad it did because it happened at home.
Home game,
Yeah. And so they did have a little recognition. They might have had it prepared for a couple of nights that we didn't make it, but it was good. 500 is a mark that you don't reach many times, and it was enjoyable to have that celebration.
What about your role as athletic director? You started that early, but I guess the responsibilities there grew as time went by.
They did, and it was a little bit difficult. I get thinking now that they hire a full-time athletic director, and here I was chairman of the physical education department, and then athletic director, and then basketball coach. And I did that for about 20 years.
Yeah.
And but you know what? I didn't even think I was overworked. I didn't know any different.
Yeah.
And but I did go to Dr. Phelps, Dr. Grant.
Yeah.
Don't let him know I did that. I did go to Dr. Grant. He came by the gym one day, and I had an offer to go somewhere, and that was my last summer to do. I had my dissertation all written, with the exception of just the conclusion.
Mm-hmm.
So when he came by there, then I had to do that summer. That was it. My time was up, and I had a chance to go somewhere. I've forgotten where. But it was another one of those, tours overseas with a good group. And so I asked him at the time, I said, I've got two requests. One is I would like to get out of physical education and pass that on to someone else that is qualified. And he said, I agree that we should have probably thought about this earlier. But he said, I wasn't sure whether you might decide to go the other route and get out. I said, no. I said, I'll go out of that. And I said, the other thing is I may want to, go on a trip this summer. And if that is approved, then I will not be around, for summer. And I will need your approval, to do that. And he said, well, I don't have any problem. I said, I will overlap school by about, a reopening of school, because it was a 6-week deal. And I said, I'll overlap school by about a week. But anyhow, he gave me his approval to do that. And I think that was about my last trip. Can't remember when that was, but that was it.
Tell me, kind of my running theory here is that as Ouachita changes and as time goes by and all kinds of, some programs go by the wayside, there are some new majors that pop up every now and then. You got online classes, and in some ways things are much, much different now. But my theory is that there's a certain part of Ouachita, the spirit of the place, that we would want to maintain, that we'd want to hold on to. Tell me about your advice for just keeping the heart of the university where it has been.
Well, I think communications is, and that's your field. Yeah. I think it is a major factor, and it is, as far as I can determine, and of course I haven't been here, but I know that communications is difficult, but it seems to be lacking. And I see a group that communicates well, but then the next, group, I don't know, this group does not communicate with this one. Yeah. And I don't know whether it's the old heads that get together, and don't recruit here. And I think that it's split somewhat, our university. I can point to myself before I left here. And it doesn't seem like I've been gone a day or two, but it's been good night. I don't know how long it's been, but about 15 years. Mm-hmm. But I know during my time, I found myself, not being involved with, certain areas, certain groups. Mm-hmm. So there's something that where we used to have the cohesiveness, we do not have. Now, are we too big, or we do not care, that much about it? Let's take care of my little niche, and I'm going to, reach and grab all that I can. I see some things that I would have been dead set against had I been here. Hmm. But I can't say a word. I'm not here. Yeah. I think some of the planning that they've done in that area over there of the gym, man, how could we put a dormitory right in the front door of a gymnasium? Mm-hmm. Well, I know why. because that was the simplest place to put it. But there are other ways to go around the simplest,
Yeah.
in my opinion.
Yeah.
But no one asked me, and I blame myself because I didn't say anything, because if I did, it would have been too late.
Yeah.
It was already drawn off.
Yeah.
And
But I can see what you're talking about in that, we have separate schools now, and so it's not just apartments, but we're kind of divided up in different ways. There's not that one faculty lounge that there used to be where people from all different areas
Yeah.
would come together. And those things actually helped.
yeah, I think so.
Yeah.
I don't know how the faculty gets together.
Yeah.
I've heard one faculty member say, "I'm not going to a faculty meeting again." Well, of course, he wouldn't be here long if he'd been under, one of the
Right.
guys we had previously,
Right.
because they required it,
That's right.
and I think that's good
Yeah.
that they were required.
Yeah.
Maybe we're trying to be big, and we're really not that big.
Yeah.
We're not any bigger now than we were
Yeah.
in 1985,
Right.
or somewhere in there.
Well, I know that the feeling about keeping a close relationship between students and faculty is still something that's talked about a lot. It's still something that I think happens a lot. And faculty that naturally will see each other, I think, there's still strong relationships there. It just seems like it's not as far and wide as it used to be.
Yeah,
And maybe some of that's because there are more people on the faculty than there used to be, and they don't have those natural points where they're all together as much anymore. But it seems to me like what you're talking about is a real key, because as you grow and as things change, there are the basic nature of the institution. You've got to take a serious look at. Are we going to let that change, or are we going to take some steps to keep that?
well, maybe
the
we don't
way
need
it's
it.
been.
I don't know.
Yeah.
But of course, you asked me one of your first questions was, what was it like then? And it doesn't appear to be anything close to what it was then. You asked someone a question and said, "Well, I don't know. I don't have. That's
It's in somebody else's area.
Yeah, we don't talk about that, or that's
Yeah.
different
Yeah.
from here." And I don't know. I'm still the old boy from farm in Eudora,
Sure.
and I'd just like to see people get along and get together, and work together,
Yeah.
and make something out of what we have
Yeah.
here. What is different about Ouachita now that's different from other schools? Of course, we need to ask that question.
Mhm.
If it's not different,
Mhm.
we need to change our shirts
Right.
and put on a different shirt,
Yeah.
and just realize that, and not
Yeah.
worry about it,
Yeah.
and shut the doors or make something else out of it.
Yeah.
Now I'm not, you can blame me for some of it, because they reached a time in my time when, man, I hated to come to the meetings over here. But boy, if you weren't in that seat, you had to answer.
Yeah.
Do they do that anymore?
No, we don't check roll.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, they ought to try that.
Yeah, it'd be interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But so they don't know what's going on
Yeah.
in other people's departments.
Yeah.
How much performance do we have with this group over,
Yeah.
This group, to where, they know what's going on at the other man's place?
Yeah.
I think would.
I mean, we do have some ways in which we are multidisciplinary, in which in committees and so forth, where we're going to be together and work on projects, even though we're not in the same departments or schools.
Yeah.
But apart from that kind of structure, it doesn't seem to happen just naturally. like it would have in a faculty lounge some years ago, where people just kind of naturally took a break during the day
Yeah.
and congregated there. That kind of thing you don't see. And I'm not saying that
That's-
that one thing is something that we've got to do. I'm just saying that that's
That's
an
part of
issue. That's an issue that I think we need
Yeah.
to always talk about.
Well, it's that type thing. However you can, emulate it in some other fashion,
Yeah.
would be good.
Yeah.
I don't know how many times the education department gets together.
Right. Right.
I don't have any idea.
Yeah.
Uh,
Yeah.
You know everybody in yours, of course.
I do.
And,
I do.
you try to
Yeah.
pull them in and,
Yeah. But you actually have to kind of work at it, because
Yeah.
we've got new faculty coming every year,
yeah.
and you don't just automatically know people. You got to kind of work at it.
Well, and I'll have to say that I have really not made the effort to get out and to find out more about what's going on,
Yeah.
and I'd like to.
Yeah.
I wish I had,
Yeah.
because I don't know the faculty
Yeah.
hardly,
Yeah.
except some of the old heads.
We're beginning to get a few of the younger faculty members in the neighborhood, like Rebecca Jones and Jason,
Yeah.
that are not far from you.
Yeah,
And then next to me is the woodwind professor, Caroline Taylor.
oh yeah,
She
yeah,
teaches the woodwinds.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
So some of that's beginning
Yeah.
to happen.
Uh, that part's good.
Have we forgotten anything? I
Man,
appreciate
I don't
the
know.
conversation. I know we've taken longer than you probably intended to, but this is all good, because this is something
It's
we
probably
wanna keep.
taking longer than you anticipate.
No,
because
this is something we
if
want to
you-
keep.
If you get me talking,
Now, I had heard the story for years about you and Ike Sharp going through the hotel,
yeah,
and I didn't really know if it was true.
well,
So
it
I'm
was.
glad to have it on record.
It
That's
was.
good. I'm glad
Yeah.
to have it.
Unfortunately, it was.
Yeah,
And we're glad that no one was hurt.
yeah.
Uh,
Well, there are a few things that went on back in those days that would land us on CNN if they happened again today.
Yeah,
That'd be
probably
one of them.
so. Yeah, yeah,
People
well,
kidnapping each other.
yeah. Well, it was raunchy times. They were different. I never will forget the time that it's a basketball game, and of course we were in the old gym,
Yeah,
and our offices were underneath the stands,
yes.
and Vincent went in his office, and then by the time the stands got there, then they were so heavy the door locked. He couldn't get out. He spent the whole time in his office
'Cause
down
there's so much
there.
weight on the door.
I asked him what score was. He said, "Man, I don't know. I didn't see a thing." Oh, we had some times, yeah. We had,
I've never heard that story. That's a great story.
yeah,
I remember Walton Gym.
yeah.
Yeah.
Well, it was a good one. It was a
That
good
was
one.
wild.
Tell you a quick story about a boy. I started. In fact, I don't know, if anybody else ever used this, but I named my plays offensively. I named them 1 through 10, and 0 through 9.
Yeah.
And so I put them on the clock. And I said, and this, started doing this in the old gym. And on 0, then you run such and such on the score.
Yeah.
And I said, okay, on 1 you run such and such. And they had about 4 things. I can remember what 5 was. Still it was the weave, but 2 and 4 and 8. Maybe they were the same. So, but every time we'd come down, our kids knew what we were running,
Right.
and I didn't have to stand
looking
up
at
and
the
holler
score.
and and give them signals or anything like that. And I had one big old boy at playing post, and we didn't have a clock on but one end. And so I stopped practice, and I said, "Do you know what we're running?" He said, yes, sir, we're running number, he turned around and said, we're running number 3. I said, son, that's an 8. And I said, no wonder you can't run the right thing. Said, you can't even see the scoreboard. So I said, so you look sooner when you start down the floor. You know, don't wait till you get all the way down and turn around and look and try to run it. But
So if light bulbs went off,
yeah,
they'd run
yeah.
the wrong play.
I'm telling you. And I had the first game we played away from home. Bill Neal, that name doesn't strike a bell with you. He was in the 60s.
Yeah.
He's one of those 5 that came here. Came from DeCoyne, Illinois. But Bill Neal was playing forward, and we were playing someone down there, McNeese probably. And he was running the wrong stuff. And I said, Bill was a smart guy. And I called timeout. I said, Bill, what is the problem? What are you running? He said, Coach, we're running number 4. And I said, Bill, that is the opponent's score. So from that time on, I always made it a little bit plainer, you know, to say, make sure now that when we're at home, we're on the home score. Yeah. When we're away, we're on the visitor score. Yeah, I mean, the opposite. Yeah, when we're away, we're on the visitor score. But I enjoyed basketball. Yeah. No question about it. Yeah. I wish I hadn't retired when I did.
Really?
Yeah. I retired just simply because I thought it was time for someone else. Of course, it had nothing to do with my retirement because I announced my retirement when I got 3 kids kicked off the team, and then 2 kids did not return at semester, and we had what we would call one of our best teams coming back. You know, I thought, oh man, I'll go out, you know, and a winner. In the conference, we won 1 game, and we won it before. No, we won it the game after that, beat Hendricks after they kicked my players off the team. And that was about if you look at my record, you'll see it was about my first year and my last year were about the same. It was because the first year we won, we went 10 ball games, and before we won the first one, and so it was 1 and 10.
Well, I very clearly remember calling games with Rex when we were the only team in the conference that had a chance against Scottie Pippen.
Yeah.
I still think that his foot was on the line on one of those shots. At
really?
The end.
Yeah. Well, we beat them.
Yeah.
We beat them the year that they went on and did well up there.
Yeah.
And then I turned around and recommended him for All-American about 2 or 3 years later. Yeah. Which he got, and he really, you know, he came to Henderson only about 6 feet 6'1". Yeah. And did not play his first year. Right. And then he just started growing like a bad weed.
Yeah, unbelievable.
And, oh man, and he did a great job. Yeah. He really did.
Well, I appreciate it.
Well, good.
I sure
Well,
do.
I hope I haven't. It's a good thing you didn't get me into Korea.
Now, were you wounded? You said you were injured. Were you wounded in Korea?
Yeah. That's what I said. It's a good thing you didn't get me into Korea. I was in athletics all the time, except when I left. They had 3 plane loads of lieutenants to fly over to the Far East. Went in Japan, and they interviewed 2 people, and he and I were 5,000. That means special service.
Yeah.
And so they said, had interviews. The rest of them knew where they were going. And they said, would you mind going to Korea because the war is is easing up? And man, I said, no, I don't mind. Said, I said, well, we're going to need some things to keep the troops, satisfied and busy, and we need some athletics and, some things like that, as time goes on. I said, fine. And I left the next day to Korea. The other guys hung around Japan about 10 days and then went 2 weeks to Camp Gifu, Chemical Biological Warfare School. Man, they were just having fun. And here I was, I took off, and they changed my MOS. MOS being your job identification number.
Uh-oh.
And so when I arrived up from Busan and got up to the front lines, then they put me in the 7th Infantry Division and said, welcome, you are 1542, which is platoon leader. And I said, man, I have not been a platoon leader. Said, I said, you've done it enough. It's about like my football experience. Said, you've been in it long enough. He said, you can handle that. Said, and as soon as we get a chance, I'll move you back, to that other job. Well, first meeting I go to, the general and the colonel are talking about this great operation that we've got going on, and that they're going to make a battle for the Triangle Hills. It was called Jane Russell Hills. And I don't know whether the third one must have been over there. We had 2 knobs over here, and that was where we were heading. So we had, some things to happen before that, and we had a little bit of training. I guess 2 weeks, before the attack was to take place.
Yeah.
And they moved us up behind a big hill one night, and my platoon was in B company, and A company was to move up and take the hill. And then they had another battalion, which was Koreans on my right, which I didn't know. And then they had another part of our unit was on the left, and by our, I mean United States, right, over there. So they all jumped off at the same time, but I was to be in reserve with my 40 people, and the other guy, the commander, captain there, the first lieutenant was company commander, took off at 6 o'clock the next morning. And he calls back and he said, battalion. Said, we're taking, fire, and some of my men have gotten hit. What do you want us to do? And battalion said, go on. Well, they had about, 1,000 or probably longer to go across, the level and then hit the hill. Well, he hadn't even gotten to the hill. And then by the time he got to the hill, they started up it. Then they reined in again with some artillery, and he calls back, battalion. I've had many people hit, said I've been hit, blood streaming down my face, but we're going on. That guy gets the Congressional Medal of Honor. And I'll tell you where he was when I passed through. And then they called my company commander and say, send a platoon, move through Able Company, and take Jane Russell. Those words will just stay in my mind as long as I am sane, But that's exactly what he told me. And I said, where is Jane Russell? He said, he'd been there shorter time than I had. He said, I don't know, but it's that way. Yeah. So I take off, and I'm not going to bore you with all this, but we made our move, and we reached with my 40 men. We reached where that guy had told his people to dig in at the base of that hill. Crazy. You're getting shot at, and hit. And they had 3 big trenches up at the top of that hill. So I told mine, I said, okay, guys, when I give you the signal, I said, all I want to hear is nothing but a bunch of hollering wild Indians. You holler and you shoot. And you keep their heads down, and we're going to the top of this hill. Don't stop until you get there. So when I looked over, and there was that lieutenant company commander, he was right there. He did not go up with us as far as I know. So we reached that point, and I spread my men out. First squad to my left, middle squad with me, the second and third squad to the right. I said, don't stop till you get there. And we made our move up that hill, and there was my first sergeant was right with me, and we reached a point to where they were throwing grenades down on us. And one came down toward me, and I had to jump over here and hit the ground and didn't realize it, but there was another one over there, and it went off. And when it did, it hit my left leg, and it hit me in 3 places. But I couldn't even look at my leg. It was numb, and I thought that it was just a concussion grenade.
Mm-hmm.
So we got up, and my sergeant hollered, "Oh, Lieutenant, my weapon quit firing." And I told him to hold him down, and I was going to try to throw that grenade in that trench. So I had to turn around and throw him my weapon, and I had a pistol, and I finally got the pistol out. In doing so, then I let loose of the handle, and I said, "Oh dear, I got to get rid of this." And I reared back into it as hard as I could, and I thought it was going to dribble right back on top of it. But it just fell into there. And then, I ran and jumped in right behind where it went off. And so we took that trench, and then he came on up and was with me. We went around the edge of that trench, and there must have been one trench here, one trench as far back as that wall, and then another big one about the size of this room where they probably slept and kept their ammunition.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, I was trying to throw grenades in that second trench, and then I walked up that walkway, and then there was another trench that went on up to the next hill. And as I looked up that hill, and here's a guy stuck his head around the corner. He was just almost as close as Dave and I right there. And here I am in between, trenches. Well, what'd I do? Run at him or run away from him? If I did, he'd sure get me. If I run at him, he'd get me. So, and I told this sergeant, I said, jump on top of the hill. So we got up on top of the hill, out of the trench. And then that guy stuck his head back around there to see. He threw the grenade. The grenade went off right there where we were. And then when he stuck his head around there to see whether it was us, that sergeant was right behind me, and he was slapping my leg, and he's hollering, "Shoot him, shoot him, shoot him." And I said, "No, I'm going to make sure he sees that he didn't get us." Well, all I had was a pistol, and I couldn't have hit him if I'd have shot at him. So I don't have any idea whether I hit him or not, and really don't worry about it, because. But we went on and took that one, and then we took the next one, and we took the other trench. I had an artillery officer who came right up with us, mm-hmm. who later was hit, not that day, but later on. He and I were in the hospital together, and boy, he was bad shape, but he lived. And so I asked him, I ran out of grenades, so I got his grenades. And I said, okay, now I'm going to throw one here and one here, because they've got, when they throw one here, they can't get out that way. So I threw one here and one here. This one went off. This one didn't go off. I said, oh dear, forgot to pull the pin. So we went ahead and took those other two trenches, but by this time I began to get the feeling in my leg.
Yeah.
Then I had to have a rifle for a crutch, and so then by this time the company commander had made it up, with another platoon, and he was hollering, well, what should I do? What should I do? I said, bring the third platoon up. Said, man, mine jumped in that first trench. Now this is so true. If a guy can save himself, that's their first thought.
Yeah.
They thought they were safe when they jumped in that first trench, but they were being hit with stuff thrown over from the third trench to the first trench.
Right.
And I had more hit right there, I think. Of course, I never did see but one other man from my unit, because I got up and I kind of walked around the side, and just as I was trying to decide, do I try to stay up here, do I go, or what? And about that time, I got shot right through the chest, right there, and it knocked me. And a boy was just in a hole in a foxhole there, not foxhole. Anyhow, he was there, and he hollered, "Look out, Lieutenant!" That's when I got hit, right there, and it went through my bulletproof vest, through me, and out the vest. And I had, turned around to where my back was to that other mountain over there, and the other bunch had not gotten on their hill. South Koreans by this time were not fighters at all. They could care less. And so all they did is they turned their weapons over and just sprayed our hill. And so that's the way I got hit, and it knocked me down. I didn't have anybody over there then, to get help.
Yeah.
So I put my head between my knees, and I just started rolling down that hill. Couldn't walk by that time. So I rolled down almost to the bottom of the hill, and then here comes two guys running. And so as they run by me, "Whoa, where are you going, guys?" Said, "Lieutenant, we're headed back to the aid station." I said, "Well, what's wrong with you?" He said, "I'm hit right here in the heel." I said, "Well, son, what's wrong with you?" He said, "I'm carrying this man back." I said, "Well, guys, if y'all move that well, y'all see if you can't pick me up and carry me." Well, shoot. I weighed about 230, and then I had enough ammunition and clothes on, because they said we'd be there 3 days. Yeah. I was ready for 3 days. So they couldn't carry me. So I said, "You just stay with me, though." And I just continued rolling. Then another sergeant came down who was carrying a lieutenant.
Yeah.
Not carrying him, but the lieutenant had him around the shoulders, and he was only hurt with one foot. And so he called one of these guys to come help, and there was a chogi bearer there, a litter. One of them had thrown down. The South Korean older people were the ones who helped us bring our wounded down.
Oh.
But man, when they start throwing that artillery in, they just throw this stuff down and leave.
Yeah.
So, and they had left one right there. He told that other boy, he said, "You grab the feet down there, and I'll take the head and shoulders." And they took me the rest of the way down, but a round would come in, and down I'd go. Man, I told him, I said, "Man, y'all killing me, dropping me." And he got hit with a shrapnel in his shoulder. Right back up, off he goes again, and got us back. Had to go through a creek. Thought they was gonna drown me, but made it through that, and back up. And from that point on, then they got me back to the hospital.
Yeah.
55 hours later. But it was good. Then they sent me back,
Yeah.
sent me right on to Tokyo after the surgery.
Do you have any lingering effects with the wounds?
Not a whole lot. My leg I do more than here.
Yeah.
See, this did not penetrate, which everybody thought until they finally did the hospital work.
Yeah.
They said there's no way hardly for it to hit and go around those ribs like it did, but it didn't penetrate. Or if it did, it went, right between the ribs.
I see.
And I'm not sure about that, but
Yeah.
but they kept me about 2 months in that hospital, and then sent me right back to athletics.
Really?
Yeah, that's then I got the emergency leave and went home,
Yeah.
and that's when I stayed.
Yeah.
My dad died 2 weeks later. But anyhow,
Well, Mrs. Vining,
I didn't mean to get all
she was
that.
fortunate to get you back.
Yeah, you're not kidding. I told her when we got married we should never do this, because I didn't want to make her, a single person, because she needs to be off running around.
Yeah. Wow.
But it turned out
Yeah.
out good.
Oh yeah.
But now you know all my history.
Well, I appreciate it.
Yeah.
This was fun. And what we'll do too is make a copy for you.